Okay, thank you very much for joining us. Today we'll take a look at building up a template from scratch. So taking a little bit of a different approach than last time. Last time we were taking an existing template and trying to do a little bit of cleanup, maybe add a little bit to it. But today we'll kind of focus on starting up. I'm going to basically pretend that I'm setting up a new standard for a company, go through the steps. And we'll try to get from point A to point B the quickest using the best available tools. Okay. So let's get started. First, a little bit about myself. Yeah, my name is Jake Wan. Been working with SolidCAD since 2018, teaching, consulting, providing solutions. Before that, I was sort of CAD designer in an unofficial sort of CAD management capacity for most of the time. So let's get right into it. So a few topics that we're going to cover today. So starting a new standard from scratch. What we're basically going to do is just take a stock template from Civil 3D out of the box and start building on that, and we'll see how far we get. So in that process, we'll kind of build up the layers and text styles. We'll generate some layers for our drawing. Then using those layers, we'll generate or update some general settings for Civil 3D styles. Then we'll take a look at setting up some tool palettes and files that support them. And finally, we'll get into a little bit of styles and commands. So the last step is just basically tweaking the styles and the default commands for those styles, kind of thing. Okay, so I'll get right into the demo portion. So let me just get started in Civil 3D. Couple things I have to set up on my other screen here. Please bear with me. All right, so I have Civil 3D just started, nothing open, and I'm just going to start right from scratch. So new file from template. Just going to start with the ACAD ISO DWT that comes with the program. Okay, so a couple of things to sort of a few house cleaning things. Sorry, I lost my cursor. Let me just get that back. There we go. So first of all, a lot of personal preference items, I guess. But first of all, I'm going to turn that grid line off. Then I'm going to do a quick check on the units. Okay, so decimal, 3 decimal places, meters. For the angle, I'm just going to set this to decimal degrees. And the precision, I'll leave it at 4 decimal places. Leave it at counterclockwise. That's pretty important for the template to be compatible with pretty much all the scripts out there. Okay, that's fine for now. I'll just go okay. Let's take a look at some drawing settings. So these are the settings that we have in Civil 3D that we don't in plain Autocad. Here, I'm just going to look over this stuff. Now, if you are always operating or mostly operating in one geographic area, you can set a coordinate system here. But I'm going to assume that, you know, be operating all over the place with this template. So I'll leave that blank. Object layers we'll take a look at later. Abbreviations, we'll skip right over that. And one thing that I'm going to do is just go into the ambient settings and turn the event viewer pop-up off. So set that to no under the general category. So when it comes to Civil 3D, the event viewer can pop up, give you some warnings, but you can't close that warning until you close whatever dialog box you have open. So turning it off right in the template will kind of help with that. You can still see it. You can still go through the tool space or tool palettes and pop it up manually. It's just we don't need it automatically coming on. Again, that's a personal preference thing. Then we'll take a look at some AutoCAD styles considerations. So when it comes to AutoCAD template management, it's mainly has to do with annotation styles, layers, maybe the scale list, that kind of thing. So we'll kind of tackle some of those. Let's set up some text styles first, because those are going to be used for dimension styles and multi-leader styles. So I'll go ahead and edit the text styles. And there are a number of approaches you can take with text styles. Maybe you use standard styles like non-annotative. Maybe you use annotative exclusively. And maybe you use text styles that have preset sizes, or maybe you use ones that are just set to 0 and you set the size every time. Now I'm going to take the approach, I'm going to have to pick one approach or the other. So I'm going to take my favorite approach, which is to take annotative styles set at specific paper size heights. So that's what I'll do. I'll start with an annotative style, create a new one. I'll call this one 2.5 millimeters. Actually, I'll start with the smallest. Sometimes we have styles that are used a little smaller font than usual, maybe survey points and things like that sometimes. So I'll put this at 2.0, apply. Then I'll create a couple more, 2.5. Then I'll create a 4.0, a little bit bigger. So subtitles, that kind of thing. And I'll create a 5, so main titles and things. So you're going to have a personal preference when it comes to these things. So maybe you only have one style to begin with, but oh, I forgot to, I'll just rename that. Try to be consistent in my naming. There we go. So I'll just double check that, 5 mil, 4 mil, 2.5, 2. Okay, and I'll close that. So now that the text styles are set, I can set my multi-leader styles. So I'll adjust I'll assume that annotated style will be being used most of the time, and I'll just modify that one. And basically just flip the text style from standard to 2.5. 2.5 is going to be sort of the standard styles in this template, text size in this template. Same thing with dimensions. I'll edit the dimension styles. Mostly I'll focus on the annotated one. So modify and set the text style to the standard text height. And okay. So there are lots of other settings we can take a look at in multi-leader styles and dimension styles, but everybody has a different preference. So I'll just leave that alone for now. And one last thing is just check the scale list. Do you have the scale list, the scales that you need? I'm gonna edit that because this is gonna be done from a civil kind of point of view. I'm gonna move that down below 1 to 100. So all that's fine. We just need a few more scales, I think, like 1 to 100 and 1 to 1000 sort of being the usable scales only is a little bit limiting. So just add some. So 1 to 200. So 1 paper unit equals 2 drawing units. So there is some automatic like millimeter to meter conversion going on, right? So that's why it's 0.3 instead of 300. And 1 to 500. 0.5. Maybe some bigger scales as well. So for general, like overall maps, location maps, that kind of thing. So I'll set up 1 to 2,000, and then I'll set up 1 to 5,000. Okay, so we now have a bunch of scale lists or scales that we can choose from. And at this point, I will save this file. So I'm going to start saving it. I'll just save it in my project folder, template, and I'll just call this template 01. So for now, I'm just saving it as a DWG. Once I get enough elements in place and I feel like it's ready, I'll save it as a DWT. Okay, so next, we should be, now that I set up some new text styles, or annotation styles, I can swap them out for whatever is being used by the styles currently. So I'm gonna open up my CIM Management Suite and use Template Tracker for that, because it's a pretty convenient way of tracking down styles and replacing them. So I'll pop over to text styles. So whenever I have, let's see if there's any being used by annotative, legend, or standard. Okay, so a lot is like standard is being used for a lot of them. I'll swap that for 2.5 millimeter annotative. And the legend as well, I'll swap that to 2.5. Annotative, I'll leave that one alone. So some of these you might be able to delete. Standard, usually not, but the other ones, if they're not being used, we can delete that right from this interface. So that kind of cleaned that up. So pretty much everything should be using 2.5 millimeter style right now. And I'll just close that. Oh, I forgot to check for dimension and multi-leader style. So I'll go ahead and check for that. Dimension style. There's one that's using ISO 25. I'm going to swap that with the annotative and delete the ISO 25. And dimension styles. Wait, we were in the dimension style. Multi-leader styles. I'll swap that for annotative. Now standard, I'm not going to be able to delete it. It's just kind of hard-coded in there, and I'm going to close that. All right. Okay, so that should be pretty good. And I'll just do another quick save. Template 02. Okay, now we need to export, well, we need to generate some layers, because currently this template has none. We only have layer 0, and that's all we have. So we need to populate a lot of layers at the same time, and for that, we're gonna kick it over to Excel using the CIM Manager Suite. So I'm gonna export the Dwg Layers. We only have one, but the reason why I'm doing this is because it's gonna populate all the columns with like line types and things that we can use, right? So I'm going to put a check mark on the ACAD ISO.lin, make sure that I have the metric line type line types loaded up. And I'll just export to Excel. So I'll just export to a spreadsheet called layers.xlsx. Have one already, but I'll just overwrite that and then take a look. So the reason why I exported that is these columns, so that these columns have pre-populated values depending on what is contained in the drawing or what options are, available. So it loaded up all the line types that exist in that line type file that I specified. Now, before we can fill all that information, we're going to need some layer names. So for that, I'm going to open another Excel spreadsheet that I sort of prepared. It's just a handy environment to generate some layer names. So let me just take a look at, well, layer name components. Just take a look at that. All right. So I'm taking an approach of combining things into different, column A and B, I have disciplines. Like column A is the actual letter that I'm going to use. Column B is just a description. Column C and D, those are categories, same thing, the letters that I'm going to use and the description. And column E is sort of subcategory, same thing. Column G and H are sort of status modifiers, existing, proposed, to be removed, abandoned, future. So you can kind of, you can sort of do a semi-manual process of use sort of Excel's fill function to do some of these things. So for example, I can take the C and then you can just fill that. And, maybe I can insert a column here, put a dash there, fill that. And then start putting together little equations like equal sign, that, the and sign, ampersand sign, will combine text together. So combine A1 with B1, and then combine C1, that kind of thing. And then I can fill that for the rest. Sorry, I didn't mean to fill C1. I should have done D1, sorry. There we go. So D1, so there we go. And here I can start combining with the subcategory as well. So I'll copy over symbol, fill that, and put in another equation. So combine that with a dash with that. Right, so we can continue doing that. I mean, we can just like, we can basically just copy paste that. Actually, copy paste value comes in handy here. So by default, if you just do Control-C, Control-V, you're going to be copying the equations and not the values, which is not that handy. So just make sure to copy the values, and then we can kind of do the same thing, like for point. And basically use the same kind of equation. So I'll just drag that down. That's not really working out. Okay, so I'll just do it manually. So combine that with that, with that. There we go. So I can go on doing that for each one of these things. Now that might take a while, but it's a heck of a lot faster than doing it, just typing it all out. So that's the power of Excel. Now, I'm just gonna use a shortcut using Dynamo. There is even a faster, because if you combine, like anytime you combine things, you can get to a lot of items very quickly. So this combination actually ends up creating like 600 something, almost 700 layers. So, but there's a quick way to doing that. I'll just use that method. So what I'm gonna do is, for now, I'm just gonna close that. So I'll pop up my Dynamo player. So I have a sort of a script set up already. If you're interested in these scripts, just let me know. And we'll get in touch with you and get you set up. So basically, I'm just gonna open up the properties for this Dynamo script. Just give me a second here. So basically, I'm just gonna open up the layer name components drawing or Excel file, and then just run it. And it's gonna automatically pick up the columns and generate the layer names. So 665 layer names generated and exported to layer name components combined.csv. Close that. I'll open that up. So basically it just, what we were doing, like what I was doing in that Excel sheet by formulas and copy paste, it basically did it all at once. Just combine every possible combination of those categories, subcategories, and status elements. Okay, so what I'm going to do that now is just copy that entire column of values. Copy that. Okay, I'll close this. And I'll just copy it right into here. Control C failed. Okay, so I'm going to have to open that up again. All right. So copy. Copy. Okay, so looks like it actually took that time, and paste it into here. Okay. So that populated all the layer names. I'm gonna go ahead and fill the rest of this stuff. So basically use the same value on all of them. I probably should have pasted it in the new layer name column, but we'll go with the setup. It should still work. Okay, so all right. So for some reason, it's filling the it's incrementing up on the transparency. So I'm going to fix that real quick. And now I'm just going to do a quick save of that. Layers with layer names. All right. So now, well, right now, all the layers look the same. So, I mean, I'm going to have to set the color and the line type and the line weight and that kind of thing. But at least I can't do all that, you know, in a very short time live, but I'll at least work on the color a little bit. So because at least colors are a little bit friendlier to automatic generation. So let me show you what I have in mind. So if I open up the, it basically took the same spreadsheet where I had the different layer components, name components, and basically just added a column for each thing, like each type, like category, subcategory, and basically assigned it color. So these colors are divisible by 10. Like if I take a look at my color palette in Civil 3D, notice how the colors on this row, it's all 10s, right? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. To make it a shade darker up in this direction, you just add 2 to the number. Even darker, add 4 to the number. Make it a little bit lighter, add 1 to the number, but then make it darker in sort of like the same shade as add 3. So I'm going to make use of this number scheme. And basically, you know, for the standard sort of like new or propose object, I'm going to make it these colors in this row. Maybe existing, make it a little bit darker by adding 2. Maybe other stuff, add 1, add 3, or add 4, just get different shades kind of thing. So, so that's basically what I have set up for. So the base colors are determined by the category. The subcategory, I'm just not gonna modify the color at all. So add 0. Same with the discipline, just add 0. Don't modify it by discipline or subcategory. Just set it by the category and then have the status determine what shade of that color we go with, what brightness. So that's kind of like the setup that I'm going with. So again, I can set up Excel formulas and stuff to get that done. But what I'm going to do is just close that and just run another Dynamo script for something like that. So it's going to generate another, oops, I'll pop up the Dynamo player. So this one is just going to do the same kind of thing as a layer names, except just add the numbers together to get the final color numbers. So layer colors.csv and just run that. Okay, so 665 layer colors generated. 2 layer colors generated.csv. Okay, so I'll open that up. Close that for now. So I have these color numbers generated. So I wasn't very picky about or careful about what color corresponds to what item, but for a live sort of company template, I would have spent a little bit more time, but this is just to give you an idea, right? So I'll overwrite the color here, just paste that in, and I'll do another save with layer names and colors. Okay, so very quickly, we were able to generate a list of layers just by combining elements and also generate a color scheme according to those elements. I'll just save that. And we'll just use the CIM Manager Suite import layer. So create/edit drawing layers. Open up that Excel file. Okay, so layers with layer names and colors, open that. And just do a sync. So that's going to tell me that I have 665 new layers with this setup. And I'm going to accept that. Okay. So now if I take a look at my layer properties, before I had 0. Now I have all sorts of colors set up, or layers with colors set up. Okay. So basically proposed having the bright color, existing being a little bit dimmer, same with feature, but slightly different. Abandoned and removals also having slightly different colors as well. So, okay, I'll close that. All right, so that gets me to the next stage. So I'll just save that as template 03. Okay, so now that I have some layers to work with in this drawing, that lets me set up a bunch of different things. Like, for example, I can set some general civil 3D styles. So now that I have some text styles and layers set up, so I'll just go into settings and right click on the drawing title and select edit label style defaults. So basically these are the defaults that are going to apply for all the labels. And for individual category, we can override them. But at least at the top level, we'll set some settings that we're going to use. So I'll just expand these things just to take a look. So the text style, I'm going to set it to 2.5 mil. Layer, I'll set it to, I do have a general category, I believe. So C, general, text. So I'll use that. Just check over the other settings. Reader, readability bias, sure. Looks good. Looks good. Text size or text height, I'll set that to 2.5. Arrowhead size, I'll keep it at 3. Okay, so the rest looks okay. So I'll just apply and okay. So that sets a layer label defaults for all these items. So I mean, I might make some adjustments here and there, but at least until I make individual adjustments, at least I know I have some settings that it's going to use and they're going to be decent. Okay, so right. So that's been set. Now object layers, now that I have some layers, I can take a look at some object layers. So that would be under the drawing utilities, drawing settings. So here I would start populating some of these layers like C, align, line P for alignments, for alignment labeling, C, align. So we got all combinations going here. So we're going to be able to find something that we can use. So I only did a couple there, but I can keep on going, fill these layers. Now, if you're interested in modifying, adding modifiers, so basically whenever you create an alignment, if you want to stick the alignment name onto it, I mean, we can set that up. So I'll just apply and go okay. Now I haven't filled out all the layers, but for time's sake, I'll just do a couple and then export that. So CIM Manager Suite, export the object layers of the current drawing. And I'll export it to Civil 3D object layers .xlsx. Overwrite what I have. All right. So this is, I get to edit the object layers in Excel. Now for the value, I'll just say dash, maybe I'll use underscore actually for the value. So underscore and then the layer name, or not the layer name, the object name gets automatically tagged on. Now that's a format that that's going to be used. Now, whether that actually gets used, that's going to be dependent on the modifier. So right now they're all set to none. So if we're going to add a layer object name to the layer of the object, then this is a value it's going to be used, but we actually have to flip that over, right? So I'll flip that over for alignment, maybe assembly, maybe a corridor, just stuff that this kind of thing makes sense for. Probably not pipe or anything like that because there's just too many of them. Maybe profile. So you might be a fan of the modifiers, might not be. I'm actually not a fan of modifiers, but if I were to use them, I would do it this way. I'll just save that. So locked column, that basically, prevents a user when they're creating an alignment. You usually get an option. These are just default, right? Usually get an option to set your own. If you set it the lock to yes, the user won't be able to. They have to accept the default. I mean, for me, that's a little bit of a heavy-handed way of method of compliance. So I'm just going to leave that at no. I'll just save this spreadsheet and I'll just bring that in. So import the object layers. Civil 3D object layers modified. Let's just import that. Next. Okay. Okay, so at that point, if I check my drawing settings, object layers, yeah, all the values have been filled that way. Just doing an Excel spreadsheet fill is so much faster than individually just copying and pasting every single row, right? So, and those ones are the ones that, okay, so that's all good. So I'll save that. And do another save as. Okay, template 04. Just creating a new version just in case I'm gonna go a step back and do things a little bit differently without having to start over, right? So, okay, one kind of side item that I want to talk about is instead of going right into adjusting further Civil 3D styles, maybe I want to populate my tool palettes. So, all right. That is going to take us to sort of setting up we need to set up some kind of a file structure for it. So let's go with I'm going to set up a folder in the C root drive. The idea is that I'm going to set up the folder as if I'm going to copy that, zip that up, pass it around to my users, and have them unzip it in the same place. And I'm going to call it something. Well, I'll just take a company name from a cartoon that I used to watch when I was a kid. I'll just call it Acme. All right. So in that folder, I'll make a couple of folders. Tool palettes. Template. And maybe profile. I can add items as I go along. Maybe, folder for Lisp or line types, custom line types, different things, but I'll start with that. So at that point, I can set up my profile. So go into options, go into profiles. I'll just add to list and call this Acme. I'll put the year of the program 2022. Okay, so I'll set that as a current now. And then change some file paths. So template is going to be, let's see. So template settings are right there. That's going to be, I'm going to browse to see Acme template. That's going to be my template folder. Save that. And actually go okay. Well, now this might be a good place to sort of start saving the template. So I'll do a save as. And I'll go to that folder. So I can put other templates in here, sort of like sheet templates, page setup templates, sheet set templates, all sorts of things, but I'll just start with the basic template. And I'll go back into options. And I'll make it so that any quick new drawing that I create is going to use that template. So DWT, oh, I forgot to save it as a, okay, so wrong file format, DWT, and I'll go right to there and save it as, okay, template. Okay, now that I actually saved it in the correct format. Oh, one more dialog box. Okay, so let's get back into the options and actually set the quick new. So already I have the drawing template file location set. Now I'm just going to set the Q new. So any quick new drawing that I create is going to use this. I'll also set up my tool palettes file location. So I'm going to add and browse. Tool palettes. I'm going to move that up to the top so that whatever I create new, it's going to kind of go in there. Now I still want access to my default one because that's where all my Civil 3D sub-assemblies and things are going to come from. So I'm going to leave that alone. I'm just going to add that path over there. Okay, so now that I have the template and the tool palette set up, then I can start populating my tool palettes. So I'll pop up my tool palettes. The default tool palette is the sub-assemblies. What I'm going to do is go customize palettes. And I'll make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to sort of collapse these things. And what I'm going to do is just make a new group. And I'll call this, you know, or maybe I'll just call it custom tools. Now, you're not going to see that group unless there's something populating it. So it doesn't matter what, I'll just grab one of these existing palettes and drag it into Acme Custom Tools. And I'll go okay. Now, populating that with one existing one, that's going to let me see that palette group. So I'm going to switch to that. So there's that generic palette that I added. Well, I'm just going to add a new palette. And here, maybe I'll call it alignment and profile. And what I'll do is, actually, that's a little bit too specific. I'm just going to rename that and just call it road. And now that I have a tool palette of my own, I'm going to be able to see it no problem in the group list. I don't need this generic palette anymore. I'm going to right click on that and delete that from this group. So here I can start populating items. So for example, I can flip over to like, let's say alignment, flip over to alignment boundary layer. So maybe I draw a custom boundary area for like an alignment. Actually, that doesn't make too much sense, but it's okay, just bear with me. I'll just, once you drag it in, you can rename it alignment boundary. So maybe you draw an alignment, but you draw an alignment or a boundary around it to denote the actual project area. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of, also, I should have just chosen the alignment line, right? So just draw a line using that layer, drag it in. Okay, and I can call that proposed alignment center line. Things like that. You can add headers, alignment. You can add separators in case I start having some profile items. Actually, I'll drag this header up here, right? So tool palettes are handy because you don't need to switch your layer all the time. You can just start drawing things on a particular layer. Start drawing another thing on that layer. And if I had, let's choose something completely different. How about environmental line, right? So I draw a line like that, draw that in. Okay, rename that. Environment line. Okay. So it just makes it handy. So you're not changing layers all the time. So we can do that with blocks, lines, hatches, commands, entire title blocks, all sorts of things. Right? So we can start populating our tool palettes. Okay, so one thing about tool palettes is if you're not used to working with them, like developing them, these save only when you close the program normally. If you crash out, you're going to lose all that. So just remember to close the program and reopen it once in a while. And let's say we have all our palettes saved up already, all populated, then you can actually go to customize palettes and you can export that entire palette group so that it makes it easier for other users to bring that in. And I'll save that in here in the tool palettes folder, and I'll just save it as Acme Custom Tools XPG, save that. That way, the next person installing your tool set, they're not going to have this custom group the first time they do. And they can just go right click on the blank space and import, and just import that XPG. And then it's going to populate those groups and that group with its own palettes kind of thing. Just make it easier for the other users. Okay, so that's about it. Now we're in pretty good shape. So the only thing that's left to do is just go through your styles, Civil 3D styles. Whoop, not there. So basically just the approach that I take is not to go through this from top to bottom, but basically just do the tasks that I would do the most often. For example, creating an alignment, right? It tells you what the defaults are for the naming scheme, what type it is, the site, alignment style, layer, label set. So it has all the defaults. I would just take a screenshot of that item, right? And then just put it off to one side, to the other monitor, and then basically go hunt those items down one by one and just set it to what you want. So you can go into alignment, check the feature settings, set the various settings that you want, or the default styles, for example. So you'd have to create new styles, set them to the default as the defaults, default name format, edit that. So unfortunately, there's no real quick way of automatically doing all that. It is going to be a little bit of a slog. You're going to have to go through one of these things one at a time, but at least everything else is done. And whatever else you're going to create, you're going to save right into your template. And you already have a folder of files that you're ready to go so that you can share your template, share your tool palettes, and the rest of the standard support files. So that will get you to go, get you all set up. So, all right, so at least for the initial part, so we've taken a look at setting up a brand new template standard or a company standard from scratch. With basically nothing, and then getting it up to speed where you can just work on individual styles. And I think if you can work on one thing like per day, like alignment one day, profile the next day, like you should be able to populate the rest of it fairly quick. But there are a lot of items, so and most of us are very busy with actual active projects, and this has to be sort of done on the side. So I understand it can take a while, but that time consumption element, that can be saved quite a bit with some tools that help the process. So I've leaned on the CIM Manager tool for quite a while to actually get the information out to a spreadsheet, track down things with the template tracker, use Dynamo to populate a lot of combinations and colors at the same time. Again, if you're interested in those Dynamo scripts, just let me know and we'll get you hooked up. So unless you have any questions, I'll let you go at that point. So thank you very much for joining. We have another session next week, and it's about ongoing maintenance to keep the team efficient. So you have a set of standards already. Maybe it's not perfect, but changing conditions, maintaining it. So just a couple of tips and tricks on that kind of stuff. But that is it. Thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you next time. Okay.